Chan may have moved on, but we're going to stay with the topic. Sourabh Gupta joining us now. He's the Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies. Let's start there with Canada. You've got 2 Canadian citizens detained in China. Meng's out on bail. You've got all these Canadians talking about this. But you've got a country that's kind of wedged in between the 2 biggest powers in the world, the United States and China. Talk to me about how they're positioned right now.
They're in a slightly precarious position. You know, in Canada, we currently have a liberal government. It's not a conservative government, which typically has always been very, very tight with the United States. Even liberal governments have been friendly with the United States, but they've also been very mindful of their international relationships. But Canada, and it's not just Canada, we're talking about the 5 Eyes countries who are linked together in the intelligence networks, the 5 Anglo countries. We have the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain, who I think have taken stronger stances on things like Huawei and its 5G network, and have gone around trying to dissuade countries from buying Huawei equipment. And these countries have willy-nilly, because of the US pressure on China, have been kind of sucked a little bit into pushing the US position forward, and themselves have put their relations with China in some jeopardy.
Well, in the messaging from the United States government, first it said the action with Meng completely unrelated to the trade talks. Then you had the President of the United States earlier this week saying, well, I could get involved and I could intervene if it deals with national security or the trade talks. A very muddled message. And China's receiving this message. What do they make of it?
Oh, I'm certain China is having a great deal of difficulty trying to disentangle the various strands. China would ideally like to disentangle the various strands and see that as purely law enforcement, and that the trade deliverables that the 2 presidents talked about move forward. And there's a little good news on the front that those deliverables are moving forward. But the real fear is that even if those deliverables do move forward, from the law enforcement track, the US government might penalize the Huawei's and other technology companies, and whatever deals are arrived within that president-to-president dialogue are then snatched out by US law enforcement via sanctions and punishments. So that for the Chinese, you really come into the negotiation thinking, I hope we have a credible partner at the other end with whom we can transact.
And the trust factor's already been strained considerably. Liu He, the vice premier here last year, looked like they had a deal. It collapses. They don't really know who to talk to. And this muddles it further, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely muddles it further. It totally muddles it further. But what I would say at this point of time for the Chinese perspective is President Xi had a great meeting in Buenos Aires with President Trump. He talked of his own accord for 45 minutes of what he was going to do on the trade and technology issue and IPR issue vis-a-vis the US, and what are the changes he was going to make on the Chinese side. He found in the Americans a willing interlocutor who was willing to listen, accept, and was frankly thrilled with the message he was hearing. I would suggest that the Chinese do continue to place faith in President Trump and move forward on this front, while also being mindful that if law enforcement can be used for particular purposes, it can work both ways. But the Chinese, I think, should still try to look forward in trying to manage, resolve, and move forward their trade dialogue with the United States.
No matter how this is resolved with the Meng case, I think Virginia Senator Tim Kaine made an interesting observation today. He said that Trump's willingness to get involved in this is going to further antagonize Canada, which has already been antagonized enough with the tariffs. In fact, we know that Trudeau said to him at the last get-together, you know, do something about the aluminum tariffs. There's already some tension there as well. I mean, so much focus is on the U.S.-China, but there's going to be overlap here with the U.S. and Canada as well.
Oh, I think there's going to be absolutely. And I mean, we're really talking, when we talk of antagonize, it's Canada. As I talked, also the other Five Eyes countries are being placed in some jeopardy out here and forced to toe the U.S. line. And remember that what Meng was brought in for, allegedly, is with regard to extraterritorial sanctions. This is long-arm jurisdiction which nobody likes, and this is not just the U.S.'s adversaries. It includes the U.S.'s allies, including Europe and other countries. So nobody is terribly happy about how the situation is proceeding.
We're going to continue to follow it. Thanks so much for your observations. It's always a pleasure to see you. Appreciate it.